Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Ron, I'm an alcoholic. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you guys. We're going to have a little fun and a little party. We've got a great speaker from Monhnton, PA. I don't know where that's at, but hopefully it just stays there, right? Real quick with us, tomorrow there is actually a Memorial Day picnic at, what's the name of that place, that park again? Peace Valley Park, Pavilion 3. It is in our Facebook page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown and the Doylestown Recovery Group. If you're not in those groups, please make time to figure it out and sign up for that, because it keeps everybody aware of what's going on, all the festivities. If you have any festivities, anniversaries, or any type of workshops or conventions or any of that, please put that in there, because it's really, we're all about recovery with this group, and we want to connect everybody, especially newcomers when they come here. You know, I always say, if you're bored and you're not having fun in AA, you're doing it wrong. There's so much out there, it's just endless. And so each one of us have our own responsibility to be a seeker of recovery, and we try to facilitate that by putting whatever we can find out there. It's a little different, nothing against anything else in AA, but we're looking to really raise this bar on each of one of us and get to that place called happy, joyous, and free every day, right? And what else can I tell? I don't know, forget a million things. If I think of some stuff, we'll talk about it after meeting. We got the world's best chairperson come up. Let's call Nick.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick, and I am an alcoholic. Amen. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes. Welcome. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Joe. Welcome.
I'm Kirk. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kirk. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. I'm Laura. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Laura. Welcome. Excellent. And welcome, everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of Big Book and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. If you'd like a CD of any speaker past or present, please see me or any home group member before or after the meeting, and they're available free of charge. And now with that, we have Sherry to come up and read the AA Preamble.
Hi, I'm Sherry, I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I've asked Kara to come up and read the AA 12 Steps of Recovery.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Kara. I'm an alcoholic. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Oh, Memorial Day. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would not injure them. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, properly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and to the power to carry that out. And 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now Nick will come up and finish with the opening.
The 7th tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supported, declining outside contributions. At this time, we like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, we do have expenses. This group provides many services, and your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. And if you think it's Cinco de Mayo, you are definitely an alcoholic. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence your cell phone, and please try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now let's introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, Alan F. from the Freedom from Bondage Group from Monhnton, PA.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan. I'm an alcoholic. And technically I live in Leesport, and that would be Monhnton. And I'm actually grateful to be here tonight, and I want to thank everyone who does service in this group. Yeah, I've heard about this group for a long time. I actually saw a workshop that was put on by this group, so I know you guys are active in service, and I certainly see, when I used to be on Facebook a lot, I see how busy Ron is all the time posting, and it's really important that the service gets done, so I want to thank everyone. And I also have to say, I was like really nervous when I got here, and I walked up to Ron, and Ron's wearing a suit, and I looked at him, and I said, "I'm your speaker," and he just looked at me, and his face dropped. And I was like, "What, you booked someone else too?" No, it was the dress. And so I'm like Alan, and I live at the shelter, right? So Ron got me a jacket, and just make sure I don't leave with it. So I said I'm from Leesport. I grew up in New York, and I am a Brooklyn boy for most of my life. And I grew up in a very normal household. I had a normal family as far as families go. There was no alcoholism in my home. My parents stayed married until my father passed away in 2001. I had 2 sisters. I was the middle child. And my parents were all about values. You know, they were all about education. And I grew up in a neighborhood where education wasn't the most important value. I grew up in Canarsie. If any of you know Canarsie, you know, think Goodfellas, okay? And I was a guy with a book in school studying and getting great grades, you know? And, you know, I guess, you know, the only thing I could say about when I was young, and of course this is always looking back, you know, backwards, because I absolutely had no perspective on anything in my life when I'm going through it, but when I'm looking backwards, I always do. And I was shy, and what could have been said about me, you know, my parents would like to say I was self-conscious, and I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I learned that means self-centered, you know, and that's really what I was. I spent a lot of time thinking about what people were thinking about me. I kind of stayed, I was quiet, I stayed on the outside. I was an athlete, but not the best athlete. I was certainly not a tough guy. I was a school guy, but I was not necessarily the best guy in school. And I didn't feel like I was really good at anything. And I just kind of like watched life. And you know, I remember when I had my first drink, and when I grew up, so I'm actually 60, I'm gonna be 63 years old, and my sobriety date is December 13th, 2013. So I got sober at a very late age, and I started drinking when I was about 15 years old. excuse me, and back in the 70s where I was growing up in New York and I went to high school in Manhattan, there were other substances and that was in there too. But I remember drinking and something changed within me that I just, I'll never forget. It was solving a problem that I didn't even know I had, because all of a sudden I felt connected to people, and the fear that I had walking around my neighborhood I no longer had. And the apprehension and the inhibitedness about talking to the girls, I no longer had, right? I mean, I had become a different person, and it was the person that I always wanted to be, even though I didn't know it. And so what I like to say is, like, if drinking did for you what it did for me, you would do it too, right? And that was something I found that the drinking and some of the other things I was doing in the early days, I was good at. Right? Like, I didn't know anything about a physical allergy that once I put alcohol in my body demands more. I just thought I was a good drinker. And it was something I excelled at, and that stayed with me, for a very, very long time, this inability to differentiate the true from the false. I mean, it was, I was partying, and that's what it was for 35 years. In my mind, okay? But that's not what it was, for more than maybe 30 years. Because I started having consequences early on. And they meant absolutely nothing to me. I got suspended from high school, I dropped out of college, I was in multiple car accidents, I was arrested. And I was gonna grow up to be a doctor, by the way, like that was what the goal was, or at least the plan for me, even though it wasn't my plan. And those plans got blown up, like pretty quickly. And, one of the things, the big book talks about, like, the real alcoholic, and it says about building these fine structures and, and pulling them down, with a series of senseless sprees. And when I look back on my life, that's really what my life looked like. Like, I was able to accomplish things, whether, I went back to school, I graduated from the top business school in Philadelphia, one of the top in the country. I got a job on Wall Street, but I had all these things going for me, but in between I was getting arrested. I was losing my career, I was losing my job, and I could never see, I felt the pain of it when I was in it, but I always rebuilt, and what was going on for me is like whatever didn't kill me was making me sicker. And I really believe that today, because I had this sense of like I was invincible. And so it kept me going. It kept me from saying, I have a problem that I need to do something about. And like what my drinking looked like. I ended up getting a job on Wall Street, and I was a hedge fund guy. And you wouldn't know that by the way I came dressed in here today. So I actually was going to wear a Grateful Dead t-shirt, and I'm glad I didn't, because it wouldn't go with the jacket. But the way I used to drink is we would go out. I got this job. I'm working in Manhattan. And basically after work every day we would go out, either people who worked at the company, or we would get taken out by the salespeople who were trying to, generate commissions, off of us. And the way I would drink was, basically, you sit down for a meal at a very nice restaurant, the server comes over and says, can we start you off with drinks? Right? And it's like, I'll have a double, right? And it was basically, I'll have a double, one right after the other, and basically, what was going on was, I was being courted by these salespeople, so I really didn't care what they thought of me, right? But I knew I was drinking, and I was drinking for free, and I was drinking as long as I wanted until the party, until they were sending me home in a car, I didn't have to drive. And I remember sometimes, like, I would get in that place, and I don't know if you can identify this with this, but where I would get that cold sweat would come over me, right? And I would wear a suit, right, and a tie. And like the cold sweat, my shirt would be soaked, and my face would be pale. And I would step away from the table, I'd excuse myself, I'd go to the bathroom, and basically puke my guts up, then wash up, pull my tie back up, throw my jacket back on, stumble back out to the table, and order a double. And like what was going on in this mind was like, I'm really good at this, I'm like a really good drinker. Like that's what I believed. And that was one of the things that kept me from like, coming into Alcoholics Anonymous for a very long time, is I always thought I was changing my mind when I was drinking, even if there was a plan to have a limit, okay, which there generally wasn't. You know, if I'm going to drink, I'm going to do it, right? But if there was a plan, I changed my mind. And that's the story that I believed, you know? And when I stopped, and there were times I really wanted to stop, and I meant it, you know? And after, you know, maybe a week would go by, because I could do that, you know? And I'd be like, well, if I could stop for a week, I could stop for as long as I want. And I could stop whenever I want. So I don't have to stop now, so I could pick up again. And I always thought I had a choice, you know? So I didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous at 54 years old. Because I thought the alcoholic was the guy who slept under the bridge, drank cheap stuff out of a brown paper bag, and I was drinking expensive stuff for a while, right? So I had a story about myself that I couldn't be an alcoholic. I tried getting sober 2001, I was 42 years old. Some circumstances in my life, my father died, and the circumstances around my father passing away was, you know, he had, my mom had called us kids, the three of us on Friday, said, your dad would like to see you. And my sisters went over there, and my thing was, you know, I was busy doing some other stuff, and I had to take care of some personal business, if you know what I mean. And I'll come over tomorrow, and tomorrow my father had already passed away. And so that was like one of the first things that said, you know, like I started having that real, you know, deep sense of shame. And I went into a treatment center, and I came out, and I went to another fellowship because there were other substances involved. And it's like, you know, if every time I cross the line with those other things is when I get into trouble. Like that was the story that I had. I mean, I had liver disease from drinking, okay? And the drinking wasn't a problem. So every time I crossed the line with the other stuff, I would get into trouble. So I come out, I go to this other fellowship. I don't buy into the 12-step program at all. I don't really believe on a gut level that I'm powerless, right? Like on an intellectual basis, kind of I get it, but not on a gut level. And without having that on a gut level, there was no way I was accepting God as a solution. Higher power, God, anything that you want to call it, like I was not hearing any of that. And I sat around, and I was a guy who went to a lot of meetings. I was a guy who fellowshipped. And I was a guy who started rebuilding his life. Because before I came in, I had lost my job, my house, my cars, and all that stuff. And like that material stuff didn't really matter because I was always able to rebuild. So I get a divorce with my first wife because she's still back in New York, you know, doing her thing. And I knew it wouldn't be safe to go back. And, you know, now I meet a new woman, and she's got 2 kids, and I become, you know, I marry her, and I'm an instant family man, right? I get a job back in the financial world, and now I'm making good money. I buy a house. I got the 4-bedroom house again. We have now 2 cars, right? And I'm fixing everything on the outside, but inside I'm dying, and I don't even know it, right? Because like you don't know what you don't know. And I remember having a conscious thought of like, this is what you get without the alcohol and the other, you know, the other substances, right? And I was like okay with that because I didn't know what a complete psychic change, spiritual awakening, personality change. I didn't even believe it was possible, much less for a guy like me. So I kind of like hung around at meetings for 5 years, watched my life on the outside get better, stopped going to meetings for 5 years. And my wife at the time, she's getting unhappy. I don't know why. She's living with untreated alcoholism, and I was like, you know, I mean, I just couldn't understand her, right? We were just like not communicating. And then my mom has a surgery, you know, simple surgery. She was 78 years old, and she ended up bleeding out into her belly, and she got brain damage, and that led to a 3-year process of her dying. So now I'm living in Monhnton, Leesport. I'm somewhere in Berks County, because by the way, I don't even know where Berks County is when I first moved there. You know, it was, I only came there because of the treatment center was there, and I thought that was like the biggest punishment a human being could have. Sorry to my Berks County friend. All right. So, you know, so now I'm driving up to New York 3 days a week to see my mom. I'm trying to deal with the situation at home, right? I have no solution whatsoever. I don't even know that there is a solution, but I know I have fear. I know I have a lot of resentment. You know, I have, you know, the feelings that are going on inside of me. I mean, I don't even know where they're coming from or what to do with them. And I said, let's go on vacation, you know, right? And on vacation, I order a double, and that was a 2-year drink. So So this is what brings me to recovery. You know, at the end of 2 years, I knew I was in trouble. I started a business in the middle of that relapse, because that's a good thing that we do, the decision-making ability, you know. My wife is threatening. She's done with me. My mom's getting worse. She's getting close to dying, and I checked myself into a detox over Thanksgiving of 2013. And I stayed there for 6 days, and the plan was, right, that I was going to come out, I was going to go back to meetings, right, because I just didn't do the meetings right last time. And I'm going to save the marriage, be there for my mom when she passes away, and save the business, right? Sounds like a good plan, right? And I didn't make it home from that detox, which was about 15 miles from my house. I didn't make it home sober. And that was the first time in my life I said, oh my God, there's no way out. You know, and that was really the beginning. Like, I'd like to say there was a first step moment. There was a first step process for me, and that was the beginning of it. You know, that was really the beginning of it, because I wanted a way out. You know, and our book says, like, you know, the baffling feature of alcohol, right? The utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity of the wish. My mom's dying, my wife's leaving me, and my business is failing. I had some good wishes there and some good necessities, and I couldn't do it. Actually, it was easier for me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous to understand the obsession of the mind. It was easier than that, than understanding the physical allergy, believe it or not. Most people have it the other way around. I knew I couldn't stay, I couldn't put together sober time. Like, I was, no matter how much time I had, I always went back. And it never got any better, it always got worse. So I went up to see my mom one last time. She slipped into a coma the next day. She was in home hospice. I checked myself into a treatment center. And I remember the day I woke up, I checked myself in on Friday the 13th, and I woke up Saturday morning, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I started to look at my life. I spent 32 days in a 28-day program, and I spent a whole lot of time reflecting on my life and looking at the mess that I made, and not the mess that I was in, the damage that I did to other people. And I remember the feeling I had, and I had a number of, like, spiritual experiences when I was in this treatment center. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but I will say that they were really powerful. But the first thing that I had was this complete sense of separation, and I just wanted to die. You know, and I asked God to take me in my sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I look back today, and I said, you know what? That's like the first line of the third step prayer, although I didn't know it, because I didn't know the third step prayer at the time. I didn't really know anything about steps. I gave myself to God, you know, and what started happening was because I didn't want to, like, really believe in God up until that moment, and I was out of options. So I started talking to this God that I didn't really believe in, and I said, if you exist, you know, show me a sign. And what happened was, and I really believe that this is spiritual experiences that people don't give enough credibility to, or enough credence to, but this whole notion of identification that's the basis of the buy-in to Alcoholics Anonymous is that connection with another human being. Because I remember hearing a speaker speaking, and you know, her story was very different from mine, but she said something in that story about that hole in the soul feeling, and now it's filled, and that's like, I remember the feeling that I was living at that moment was that feeling. And I started paying attention to the AA speakers that were coming up, and I started having that identification piece. And that was the first sense of connection I had with human beings in a really, really long time. My world had gotten very small in my marriage. I wrapped my world around my wife's, you know, my wife and her family and all this stuff. I cut myself off from all the people, you know, that could have helped me, that would support people. I had nothing. My mom died while I was in treatment. And I remember the night after the funeral was while I was in treatment too. I remember the night I came back, and I cried myself to sleep, which is pretty much what I did, like, a lot of my first year. So if you're new, stay with me. Don't leave yet, okay? But I mean, I cried myself to sleep that night, and I started talking to God. And some of the things that occurred to me were, people weren't designed to hurt people. And I had done so much damage in my life that I could never repair. And I couldn't live with myself. And I made this deal, basically, you know, where it was like, I would do anything, you know, and I asked God, like, I'll do anything to not live like this. I need your help. Please help me, right? And like I was overcome with this sense, there was a vision in there, and I don't talk about it, but I was overcome with this sense of everything is going to be all right. And it just could have lasted a moment, I don't know, but I'll tell you that moment has lasted 8.5 years because I've never forgotten it. And I've lived to the best of my ability to the deal that I made, okay? You know, I'm not perfect in AA. I'm going to say it here. I'm not perfect in AA, but what I am is consistent. Okay? Not a day goes by these days where I'm not doing something for someone else's recovery. You know, and that's something I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's something that kept me going. But you know, so the deal that I made, and basically that was like my surrender. And I decided I'm going to listen to someone else because I didn't know crap about living. I'm 54 years old. I had a successful Wall Street career. I had this fancy degree from fancy school. And here I am in treatment for the second time, not able to be there for my parents when they passed away, not able to be there for my sisters to support them. And I grew up in this loving home. Something went wrong with me, and I didn't know what it was until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So they told me, get a 12-step contact, you know, on the outside before you leave here. And I called this guy, and he's like, I'm in Florida. And I remember thinking like, you know, because like I was in that self-pity place, right? Like my luck, right? And he said, I'm landing in Philadelphia. And he told me the day, and that's the day I was getting out of treatment. And I met him at a meeting. And I'll never forget, because I had this talk with him. And again, like there was a lot of darkness going on in the early days for me. And he told me his story a little bit. And here he is. He's this big now. I go into this meeting to meet this guy. He tells me what he's going to be wearing, right? And I see this guy, and he's this big guy, right? And he's telling me a story about he was a bookie that, you know, worked at a trash company, and he's telling me all this stuff with violence and all that. So like, this guy's messed up, you know, like. But he said something to me that I couldn't wrap my mind around at the time, but I fully understand it today. He said, you're going to touch more people in your recovery than you hurt in your addiction. Now, when I came in, that was my first meeting outside of treatment. I didn't know what that meant. And my feeling was, please, I need help. I need help. Like, I didn't realize, like, God and helping other people was a solution. And I had a lot to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And all really I needed was willingness. And I really believe those prayers that I said to God while I was in treatment and continued through my first year is that, God, please, I can't do this alone. I need your help. I think what I got from that was one thing, and that was willingness. Because I was pretty darn good about following directions because I knew I didn't know anything. And I asked him to be my sponsor. He's like, oh, I live in Florida most of the year. And so at my third meeting, I got a sponsor. And I remember the first meeting I had with my sponsor, my first sponsor, and he said to me, he took the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, he touched it, and he's like, you're going to find and hear everything you were looking for in drugs and alcohol. Everything was like a Zen puzzle to me, you know. I didn't know what he was talking about. And I didn't know what he was talking about because I didn't know what I was looking for anymore in alcohol. Alcohol hadn't worked for me for decades. Like, I remember, okay, when drinking meant conviviality, joyous, you know, harmonious, you know, brotherly love and all that stuff. I remember the early days when, you know, when I was at Stony Brook College, you know, picking up the girls because I had a loose tongue and I had no inhibitions whatsoever, no self-centered fear. Like that, I do remember that, okay? But I had a much harder time thinking about, you know, how I would come home from work after a day of trading when things were really bad and pick up a bottle of Jack Daniels and a six-pack and basically drink myself into a stupor, right? Come to the next day, take a shower, you know, go to work reeking, right, sweating and reeking, right? And then I'd have a good day at work. I'd come home and I'd buy a bottle of Jack Daniels and a six-pack and I would drink, you know, to celebrate. And I was married. My wife wasn't into drinking. She was into doing something else. And she was sitting on one side of the room with a mirror, and I was on the other side with a bottle. That was our relationship. And I couldn't remember how bad it was. And I really had to think about what I was looking for in alcohol, because, you know, everything that I did got me to the point where I was then. And what I did was I started going through the steps. Now, my lovely fiance here uses this term in between solutions, which I really love. And that's exactly where I was when I came out of treatment. I no longer had the alcohol, but I didn't have God fully yet. And that was a process for me, right? Like I'm working the steps. I'm meeting with my sponsor. I'm doing this stuff. Didn't even drag my backside all that much on my fourth step. I was like pretty good about getting this work done. But I was hurting. My wife had filed for divorce while I was in treatment, right after the funeral. And when I came home, which she didn't want me to come home, she wouldn't talk to me. So I'm a newcomer now. I'm a real newcomer, right? And I'm walking into a house and this woman's turning her back on me and I just want to save the marriage. Like it was my mission in life was to save the marriage, save the business and all this stuff. And all I kept hearing is about recovery. Put your recovery first. Not from her, from people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I used to say I was lucky, but today I say I'm blessed. Like I fell in with a group of people in Alcoholics Anonymous who were doing the deal, right? 3 sides of the triangle, okay? Sponsoring, service, active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And like Ron was saying about fun, if it's not fun, right? And I'm going out to dinner with these people. By the way, not willingly, like they had to kidnap me sometimes to get me out to dinner. They were like, we're going to Alabrigi, we'll meet you there. And I was like, okay. And I get in my car would drive home. And somewhere along the way, they were like, we changed our mind. We're going out for Thai food. Meet us. And I was like, oh man, And so I would go there and I would watch them. And they were laughing. They were having a good time. And even though they had problems in life, they weren't killing themselves over it, and they weren't drinking or drugging over it either, and they were friends. There were two other guys. So 3 people came with me today. At least 2 others were supposed to come, and then they got COVID. One of the things I was going to say is if I said what it's like now, is I have friends, that would be more than I ever, thought I would ever get out of Alcoholics Anonymous. These people took me under their wing, and they were basically my safety net till I was able to get through the steps. Do my amends, get moving on my amends and start sponsoring people. And they've stayed that way, almost all of them, right, for the last, 8.5 years, and we've become very, very close, and we've become, that is, and I believe, right, that is what the Fellowship of the Spirit is all about. We're out there doing service together and supporting each other and sponsoring and working with each other with what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. But they were doing that for me. And I just wanted to sit at home and figure out, how to solve all my problems. And feel sorry for myself, because that's all I really knew how to do. So they started getting me involved in service really early. They were bringing me up to the treatment center. We have a big treatment center near where we live, and they would bring me up to the treatment center. They used to do this thing. They basically set it up themselves. The treatment center said, have fun with it. And we'd go up 8 to 10 people, and we would tag team. People would do a 5 or 6 minute share, and then we'd call on, randomly call on one of the other ones, and they'd come up. And not only was it good, the service and carrying the message, but the people in the treatment center got to see what the unity side was really all about. Because we would walk in there laughing and have a good time. We'd walk out laughing and have a good time. They weren't walking out, right? They were still there. But this is what's on the outside in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't spending my time thinking about what do we do in recovery? Do we go bowling or something like that? Am I going to be stupid, boring, and glum? Well, considering where I was coming from, that would have been an uptick for me, So as I'm working my way through the steps, I'll just say on the 4th step and on my 5th step, I did not feel like I was walking, and I'm going to be honest, right? I didn't feel like I was walking, on the broad highway hand in hand with God, and I didn't get those promises. What I got was, oh my God, look at my life. There I am in every one of these things. Going on my 2nd divorce, I was not there for my parents. I mean, when my mom was dying, I made it about me, right? Like my best friend, the last living enabler, you know, is going away. You know, and she had like end stage dementia, and I had a hard time like watching her eat. Now this is a woman who raised me, and this is a woman who stood by my side through all the crap that I put her through. And believe me, there was a lot in whatever it was, 35 years of active or whatever. So my inventory was kind of like a big wake-up call. And I didn't feel, when I did my fifth step, what the book, you know, what the book says. But where I really started to get it was when I started to make amends, right? And, you know, I backtrack a little bit here. Something that was really interesting. So when my wife moved out when I was at a meeting, okay, I got you like this. I'm bringing you with me on all my talks because I love that, right? Like, that's funny, right? I was at a meeting, it was 8:15 in the morning on a Saturday, and I get a text saying, if you come home, I just want to let you know, there's, you know, she was being nice, I guess, you know, there's a moving truck outside the house, I didn't go home. And when I went home, so I said four-bedroom house I lived in, right? 3,000 square feet of furniture was gone when I walked in the house. It was my head, like the echo, all the thoughts that were going through my head just echoed through the house. And it was, my first year was really difficult, you know, but if there are new people here, I didn't drink, right? And I didn't use anything else to medicate it away. Just kept doing, what I was told is just keep moving your feet. And one of the things that I had to do, and one of the things my sponsor said to me is, he said, this may all turn out to be a blessing. He didn't say, this is a blessing. I would have told him I'm getting a new sponsor. He said, this may turn out to be a blessing, right? And looking back, it all was, because you know what? I got to concentrate on recovery. And I got to start working on this relationship with this higher power that I wasn't sure even existed before, you know, my experience in treatment. And I would put on, and this is the part that I wanted to talk about, is I would put on, I guess I was using CDs at the time, right? I would put on either like Joe and Charlie, or I put on Joe Hawk, the Salvation Army, 1987 Salvation Army talk, right? And that would be on in my house constantly. So it's like I had a speaker meeting going on at all times. And I remember, there was also a book someone gave me called Alcoholism, a Mind-Powered Disease. And between those three things, at some point it hit me that my mind is all screwed up. And I have to tell you, like, this depression set in, okay? Because, right, like I told you, like, the best business school in the country, right? Like, I told you, I've had top 10% graduate, Wall Street, all this stuff. Like, I'm a smart guy. My mind is my best asset, right? And, like, now I'm learning and believing, right, that it's not that I lost control of my drinking, I lost control of my thinking. You know, and I understand that today. And I think I needed to understand that to move forward in recovery in the early days. So now I'm at amends, right? And Joe Hawk, he talks about making all your amends, like all of your amends, right? And that was the philosophy that the people, you know, my sponsor and the people I were hanging out with, you know, it wasn't just go do your family, all your amends, you know. And the truth is, it's like things keep popping up, you know. I mean, I had no capacity on my first inventory to see anything beyond like what was immediately blocking me off from my higher power. You know, there were a set of circumstances that were, you know, really big, and I really needed to do a lot more work after that. But I remember when I made amends, and I had the thing that was propelling me through recovery also was the fact that I never wanted to hurt people again. You know, I have a sponsee here who'll tell you like that's, you know, I haven't lived up to that as best as I could, right? Like you know, I'm a human being, right? but like not the way I hurt people in the past. I just didn't want to hurt people anymore. And when I had done my inventory, I had seen how badly I hurt people. Then I made amends, right? And the blanks were filled in for me. And I have to tell you something, like, you know, the way I was taught to make amends is, you know, we lay out, you know, how I believe, like, I hurt people, and my defects of character, you know, self-centered, I was thoughtless, I was inconsiderate, I was, you know, and not glib like I just did it, but I mean from the heart, right? And then, you know, I asked them the questions of, you know, is there anything that you want to add to it, or leave anything out, and how you felt about it, what I could do to make things right? And I remember making amends to my sisters. I made amends to my sisters individually. Because, I mean, from a child, I sucked the oxygen out of that house. Like, there was no room. They missed out on their childhood because of me. You know, I was either like getting the pat on the back attention, or I was like, the bailout, you know, attention. But Alan was always in the center of attention, you know, in that household. And I had a lot of amends to make, a lot of things to clear up. And I remember I was talking to my baby sister, my younger sister. She's not a baby anymore. And when I was done, she said, we were never mad at you. We always loved you. We just thought we were going to bury you right after Daddy. Now, I could have done inventory for 10 years and not have seen that. Not truly have seen the impact and the effect that I had on other people. You know, one of the things my sponsor told me about amends, and I love this and I passed this one on, right? Those 9-step promises that when I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, like, oh yeah, I want that. You know, I want to know a new freedom and a new happiness. I want to comprehend the word serenity. I don't want fear in my life, right? Like all those things, when I make amends to people, particularly the people who are close to me, I'm giving those to them. Because my sisters can sleep at night not worrying that they're going to get a phone call from the cops or from a hospital, you know, or from the morgue or whatever it is, you know, because of what I was doing, right? They don't feel useless anymore because they're not trying to get their brother help, right? They have been freed. They know a new happiness, you know, and a new freedom. And in that's how I get mine, by making things right with others. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, so both my parents passed away. And I didn't get to make amends, obviously, while they were alive. And I think that this is a really powerful part of my story. Because sometimes when I talk to people about, you know, well, they're like, well, they're dead. I don't have to do that. Or they come up with some other thing. And, you know, one of the things that my sponsor said to me is, well, the way he said it is, dude, okay, this could be really powerful. Graveside amends are some of the best amends. You're going to see it. You're going to get an answer. And he was like more excited than I was. And it was actually the way I picked him as a sponsor, because one day at a meeting, this guy comes up to me. I think I had 6 months. And he starts talking to me outside on the steps of the church. And he's talking to me. And there's a group of 30 people mulling around, right? And he's talking to me like I'm the only guy there. And he's listening to me, right? And he asked me where I was in the steps, and I told him, you know, what I was going to be doing. 2 days later, about making these amends at the cemetery up in New York. I drive up to New York, and he's like, well, here, take my number, right? And he goes, give me your number. Sunday at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm driving up to New York to go to the cemetery, and my phone rings in the car. I was like, dude, I'm so excited for you. He's like on fire, you know? And he goes, I want you to call me as soon as you're done, right? He wasn't my sponsor. He was this guy, you know, with some time, who's doing the deal, like really does the deal. He's got 36 years now. He will talk to a newcomer before he talks to any one of his friends at a meeting. Okay, if there's a newcomer there. And I learned more by watching this guy than by listening, because he's the deal, you know? So, and I was that guy at one point, you know? So I read the amends. I wrote a letter to my parents, you know, and I'm reading and I'm talking to 2 headstones, and it just, you know, I'm not really feeling it, like in terms of like, where's my, answer here? Like I'm not getting it. And I started talking to them like they were my parents, you know, like they were just sitting in the living room. And I started joking around with them, you know, and my father was sitting in the armchair, my mom was on the sofa, and I started telling my father like what a crappy sense of humor I got because I got it from him, and you know, how overly sensitive I am because I got that from my mother. She was all the emotional one, and I was just chatting with them and stuff, you know. And I leave, and I call up Richie, and I'm talking to him, and it's like, just didn't feel it. Oh, and in the amends, okay, I told you how I was told to make amends, right? What did I leave out? How do you feel about it? And what can I do to make things right? And my letter says, and I have the letter, it says, it spooks me out to say this, but I am open if you have a way of getting me a message about how you felt, you know, what I left out, what I could do to make things right. And he's like, you're gonna get an answer. I thought the guy's nuts. A week later, I'm in a speaker meeting on 8 and 9. We share after the meeting. I'm talking about this thing. And again, like my whole first year, I'm like just crying, right? I walk out of the meeting, and this parish center where the AA meeting is, there's NA meetings, SLA meetings, OA meetings, Al-Anon meetings. It's you know, perpetual like meetings of one sort or another. And I walk outside, and there's this woman, and she said, "Can I talk to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, you know, young mom, I don't know, late 30s or something like that, and she's crying, and she says, "You know, my daughter's in the NA meeting, and I don't know what to do." And she starts telling me her daughter's 17 years old, and she's a heroin addict. And, you know, here I am with whatever, 7 months, and, you know, what do I know to say, you know, other than, you know, have you gone to Al-Anon? Because I know when I was 17, there was nothing anyone could have said or done, nothing, okay, that would have made me, you know, consider I have a problem worthy of doing something about. But I'm looking at this woman, and I'm thinking, like, this was my mom. Like, I remember, like, when I was 17 years old, you know, she would stay up all night. I'd walk in at 2 in the morning, and she'd be like, "Alan?" And I'm like, oh, you know. The next night, I'd come in at 3, right? She'd be like, "Alan, is that you?" Right? I finally started staying out, right? I just felt bad about keeping her up all night. And she was probably up all night when I stayed out. And here I am talking to this woman, and looking at her like she's my mom. And a friend of ours comes over who had some time, this woman Ann, and she says, we're talking, and then after the woman walks away, she says, "Well, maybe what you need to do is to work with guys so they don't put their family through what you put your family through." And so what I'm gonna say right now, and I mean this, and the people who are here can certainly, you know, attest to this. When I started sponsoring, I have not stopped. I stay very active in working with guys, okay? It is the gift of this program that if you haven't done it, you don't know what you're missing. If you do it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? You know, I have a prayer meditation routine. I have a good 10-step kind of thing going too, right? But I have a good 11-step prayer meditation routine going on. And I'll tell you right now, I could join a monastery and pray and meditate for 18 hours a day and not have the level of spiritual growth that I've gotten from sitting and looking at a man on the other side of the table and hearing him tell a story to me and me saying, you know, I've done the same thing. And this is what I did about it. Let's look at the book and let's look at the steps and let's see, okay? And it's right here, okay? And being able to, you know, what I find is everyone's a mirror of me. Okay, every single defect of character I have is in, you know, all the guys that I work with to a lesser or greater degree. Sometimes I have to look harder, but you know, what happens is sometimes like what I find is when I'm talking with other guys, something about, like when I'm counseling them in the steps, like how to address this thing, I'm talking to myself. I'm looking at this thing from, you know, from an angle that I never looked at before. And there's really a miracle in being in the sunlight of the Spirit and actually doing this work. You know, there was a point where, you know, I said about my mom, you know, having the surgery and she had that bleed. I was the one that took her to the hospital for the surgery. She asked me to come in from PA and drive her to the hospital Monday morning for the surgery. And that Sunday night she was trying to weasel her way out of it, and I was having that sense of humor to try to keep her comfortable and say, it's no big deal, it's just a hernia operation, you're gonna be okay. My second inventory, I still have resentment toward the doctors in the hospital. And I'm writing about this, when I get to the fourth column, I'm like, wait a second. How much of this is like, do I own? Right, like I talked her into having the surgery. I started getting into that place of morbid reflection that feels so comfortable sometimes, feels so familiar, I should say. And I remember talking to my sponsor, he's like, dude, man, you don't have the power over life and death. And I talked to my fiance, and she's like, you don't have the power over life and death. And I talked to someone else, and they said, you don't have the power over life and death. I'm at work one day, and a client comes in, and I said, I haven't seen you in a while, what's going on? And she sits down, and she starts telling me about her 39-year-old daughter died. And I'm listening to her story. Right? She's going on for like 35 minutes, I'm just listening. And the very last thing she said is, and I feel like I'm responsible. And it hit me at that moment when I was thinking like, this is just your grief process. That this is just my grief process. A week later, a guy asked me to sponsor him. And he hasn't been able to get over the fact that his brother killed himself the day after it was his birthday or something like that. They had a nasty text exchange the day before. I feel like I'm responsible, right? And I think that God puts these people in my life, okay? Not to help me. That would be me being selfish and self-centered, you know, for each other, for the purpose of each other, right? And I really think that this is what it's all about. So what I want to say is like, when the first guy said to me, you're going to touch more people in your recovery than you hurt in your addiction, and I didn't know what he was talking about, I look back on it today, I don't know numbers, quantity, did I touch more people or whatever it is. But I think qualitatively, I'm certainly, doing a whole lot more good than I ever did in my life, as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember what my first sponsor said to me. He said, about, you're going to find what you're looking for, in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't understand that. And then I started thinking, well, sense of ease and comfort. But I remember when I used to come home from work when I was trading and I had a miserable day or a good day, and I would just drink myself. Both days I would do the same thing, and the only difference that you would notice, an outsider, is my posture when I was drinking. On the bad days I was slumped over, on the good days I was all full of myself, because I'm a genius, right? Today I'm in a related field. I'm still like in the stock market thing. The stock market is still as stressful as, as anything else, okay? But I probably talk to 4 or 5 alcoholics a day, 3 or 4 of which are probably my sponsees or newcomers. And when the market closes, I'm done, right? Like, this is like a switch, right? Nope, that's it. And I'm either on the phone with another alcoholic, I rest, relax, occasionally I get a meditation before, and I get to a meeting. And at those meetings, I do what my sponsor does. I look for the new guy. I talk to the new guy. And by the time I come home after that meeting, okay, I've got that sense of ease and comfort and that sense of peace that I was always looking for, that I don't need to put a drink in me to turn the noise off in my head, right? Because my real problem, was not the blotting out, right? It was the consciousness of my intolerable situation. I had a story about how bad my life was. My life isn't bad anymore. My life is great. I have problems. I have situations. My life is good, okay? And the thought that I had when I first came into AA, that I hear from a lot of new guys, is, if I lived 10 lifetimes, I could never fix all the damage that I did. I feel today, if I lived 100 lifetimes, I could never pay Alcoholics Anonymous back enough, right? Because I had no clue what this was about. I never gave it a fair chance. And I guess I needed to go on the journey that I needed to go on to get here. But I'm 62, I'll be 63 in July, right? I spent most of my life, really all of my life, as a taker. And if the rest of my life I just give back to the best of my ability, that's going to mean something in the big picture of things. And I'm going to end by saying, I don't do this perfectly. And every time I try to hold myself up to that standard, I fall short and I get disturbed, right? And like, my job is not to get disturbed. I'm no good to anyone. But I am consistent, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. Sorry I didn't get the dress code right, and I hope I did something to make up for that. But I want to thank you, Ron, for asking me to speak here, and the group, and thank you all for your service.
Let's thank Alan one more time. Thanks for that powerful message, and it is all about the newcomer. So if you're new, hang out after the meeting, come before the meeting. We're here, we're solving all the world problems right before the meeting. So if you got any world problems, come see us. We're pretty good at it. Anyway, that's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. We need speakers. Monday night in this church, we have a step meeting each week. So anybody interested in doing a talk on a step, see us after the meeting, okay? And we have a big book study, meets at 7:30 p.m. at Salem UCC Church every Thursday. And again, we get there about an hour early. There's the meeting before the meeting after the meeting. If you're struggling, get with somebody, grab a sponsor, listen to what he says. Don't do what he tells you to do. I don't know, is that right? All right, anyway, we got a nice way of closing. If you care to join us, we will. Oh, it's important. Our speakers come here at their own time and expense. We form a line at the end and thank them personally. It means a lot to them. Let's take a moment of silence. Do with it what you like, and if you care to join us, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. And help us eat the rest of those hot dogs and cronuts. And we're going to throw these chairs on the rack. That's about it. See you at the picnic tomorrow.